there's a lot of life ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely. I mean, something could go terribly astray, but most of us aren't living our life assuming that tomorrow we're going to die. But we treat our goals like tomorrow we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, let's actually think about what's important for where we are right now with all of the things that are going on. And one of the questions that I always ask in the 531 is to say, what do you know most likely will be true in X number of years? And
Mm-hmm.
and things that I'm talking about is, how old will your spouse be? How old will your kids be? Where will you likely be living? How old will your parents be? Will they be needing you more? I mean, like, because part of it is to get into the space of like, what's probably going to be true?
Mm-hmm.
And let's plan around reality instead of some make-believe perfection that none of us ever have.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. If scrolling through social media leaves you feeling like every other business owner has cracked the code on success and left you out in the cold, good news, today's show is for you. I'm Tonya Kubo, joined by Gwen Bortner of Everyday Effectiveness, and we are going to tackle one of the most toxic traps for entrepreneurs, which is comparison. Fun fact, maybe not so fun fact, comparing your business to others or yourself to other business owners is nothing less than destructive. So we are going to unpack the reality behind those perfect looking businesses. Yeah, because Gwen and I, we see under the hood of a lot of businesses every single day. So we're going to just tell you the reality behind those perfect looking businesses, and we are going to give you practical strategies to define success on your own terms. And Gwen, I want to jump in immediately, and I'm going to state a potentially unpopular opinion and say that I feel like in many cases this tends to be a gendered issue where women tend to be much more vulnerable to the destructive effects of comparison in business than what I see with male entrepreneurs. Fight me on it, Gwen. Am I right or am I wrong?
I think both genders do a lot of comparison, but where I think women immediately beat themselves up, and giant generalities here, of course. Where women generally beat themselves up, men, I think, see it as a challenge, like the gauntlet has been thrown. And instead of saying, oh yeah, I'm not nearly as good, blah, 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 they usually approach it. I mean, like I've heard them say statements. It's like, well, he's not near as smart as I am. That's just stupid that he's doing well. I've got to, and where women are like, oh, I must be not nearly as smart as they are.
Yeah. That's so good. No, because what I hear, it's funny that you bring that up, because what I hear is statements like, well, maybe when I'm a real business owner or I'm a grown-up business owner, I'll feel this way. And I never hear men use those terms. They never take that as a sign that they lack. They just take it as a sign, anybody can do this. Why not me?
Yeah, no, it's exactly the same thought, but projected on the opposite person.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where I think women project the negativity on themselves and the positivity on the other person. I think men, on the whole, like I said, these are giant generalizations. This is not universal. Project the negativity on the other person and the positivity on themselves.
Yeah. So I think when I'm thinking of comparison, one place where it starts to me is that there is this belief that there is a right way to build a business, which means there is a wrong way to build a business.
And
What
of
are your
course,
thoughts on that?
I am so anti those kind of statements because I am always about there are dozens and dozens and dozens of right answers.
Mm-hmm.
There is a more right answer for you than some of the other right answers. And when I'm working with folks, that's always my goal, is to help figure out what is our best right answer for
Mm-hmm.
you and your situation, as opposed to the right answer. Because I don't think there is the right answer. There are lots and lots of right answers out there. So trying to figure out what really is the best right answer for
Mm-hmm.
you is the only thing I really care about.
So if that's true, if there really are multiple right answers, then why is it we seem to be surrounded by several people painting a picture of what seems to be a very similar right answer? And I'll just use some examples, right? Like on social media, and it varies by industry, right? But lifestyle influencers all have a pretty distinctive look that is the same, right? We see a lot of white, somewhat minimalistic, maybe cozy minimalistic houses. We see a certain number of children who never seem to have dirty faces. We see like a very common routine over on, let's just say, the business, generalized business, right? We see a lot of emphasis on, quote, productive morning routines, right? You've got to get up at this time of the morning and do all of these things before you check email, before you do this, before you do that. So if there's no right way, there's a lot of ways, then why is it that we seem to be presented with a right way?
I wish I really had the answer to that, quite honestly. I know part of the reason is someone, for some reason, gets
Mm-hmm.
a megaphone and says, this is what worked for me, and look at all of this success, and yada, yada, yada. And everyone's like, I am starry-eyed. I want that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The way to get it must be by their process, their
Mm-hmm.
piece, their whatever. It's interesting that we're having this discussion because I was just re-listening to Write a Must Read by AJ Harper, and I know you've
Mm-hmm.
read this book as
Yeah.
well. And I've listened to it more than once. I'm about to start an early stage process of writing a book, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm re-listening to her amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
And I came aware of AJ as someone who worked with Mike Michalowicz on his books, but then got to know AJ in person and through a whole lot of other places. I know that she has helped a ton of people write their own books, not as someone who's functioning in a, kind of in a ghostwriter or writer partnership way, but actually as an instructor these days. But her early career really was as a ghostwriter,
Mm-hmm.
right? So people would publish books that they really had not written at all.
Right.
AJ had written these books, right? And I was just listening, like before I pulled up to the house yesterday, where she's talking about sitting at a conference, listening to someone from the stage talk about how they, were able to create this bestseller, and they don't talk at all about hiring a ghostwriter,
Mm-hmm.
even though AJ knows they were because she was.
She was their ghostwriter. She's like, hey, wait a minute. I did that.
I did that. And she's great because I mean, like, there's no clue of who this person is, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she absolutely makes it completely anonymous. It says, and then they talk about how they were on, the New York Times bestseller lists, but they conveniently left out that they paid $100,000 to game the system to be on the New York
Mm-hmm.
Times bestseller list. But now they're selling you can be a New York Times bestseller list author too,
Mm-hmm.
to a bunch of people who are like, well, they did it, so I must be able to do it too, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's the issue. I mean, her example, which is a
Mm-hmm.
real life, real person really knew this example, is the problem. Is we talk about the end result.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, look at what I did for so and so, but we leave out a whole bunch of details.
Yeah.
Because they're maybe not as fun, they're maybe not as sexy, they may not actually be attainable for everybody. So we're just going to leave that out so everyone believes that they can do it. We're selling the hope as opposed to the actual reality of what's there. And I think that's the problem. And so I think people see that and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." And so then one other person does it and they say, "Hey, I did it too." And it's like, "Oh, well, if those two people did it, then that must be the way." And then if someone comes up beside them and says, "Yeah, I did it too, but I did it completely this other way," either people are like, "No, shut up. Don't tell them that." Right? Or people are like, "Well, but that must not really be the way because these two people said it's this way. So that can't possibly be right." Right? It's the conversation we've had before, when we're listening to Nick Peterson talk about innovation versus information. Right? The innovation seems cool, but no one actually pays for innovation.
Right.
It's too out there, and I don't know how to apply it to my life. And so when someone says something contrary to what is the considered best practices, which I always point out is really common practice, then we're like, "Oh, well, that can't possibly be right because no one else is saying that."
Right. Well, so what you're saying, it brings up a couple of points. So one is, and I'm seeing this all over headlines right now, right? There's a lot of like creator industry, influencer industry reports coming out where a lot of creators are talking about how like a frustration that they have is they are rewarded for producing content that gets attention, and that content that gets attention is not necessarily good content. Like they don't feel like they're being rewarded for putting out value. They're just being rewarded for putting out stuff that gets clicks and watches. And they're frustrated with that. And yet here, so many of us are on the other side watching, and I'll just make up a name here, but watching like John Smith creator and going, well, his stuff is getting 5,000, 6,000 views. That's what I have to do if I want to get attention on my bookkeeping business. Not realizing that, no, John Smith is selling attention, right? That's how he's getting paid, is all those watches, not whatever he is talking about in his video.
Right.
And so not only are you comparing yourself to somebody with a totally different business model, but you're comparing yourself to somebody with an entirely different goal.
And potentially someone an entirely different space-time in their business.
Right.
You just opened your bookkeeping business. John Smith's been doing this for 10 years.
Right. So there's that
This is
piece.
not what John Smith was doing 10 years ago.
Well, exactly, right? So then there's also the piece of, that myth of the overnight success. Just because you just heard about John Smith today, just because everybody is telling you John Smith blew up overnight, came out of the blue, doesn't mean that John Smith has not been creating content out there for 10, 14 years.
So my favorite story about overnight success came out of the mouth of Debbie Makehomer, who years ago, this is when I was in the knitting industry, years ago had written a book that was a knitting based book that just totally went through the roof, right? And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, she's an overnight success, blah, 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 blah." Well, she was actually at a convention doing like a keynote kind of thing where I was at. And she talked about how her overnight success had taken her 18 years.
Yep.
Right. And that she had written, I want to say something like 12 or 14 books before this book actually hit. Once it hit, and part of the reason she popped in my head is I was just at the airport this last week and I saw there was a new Debbie Makehomer book out.
Yeah.
It was actually in the airport bookstore, which means it's at a different kind of level, when it's getting that level of publicity and distribution and all of those things. But that's because she did become this overnight success and was able to maintain it over time. And so now she's at a different level, but it wasn't her.
Right. And we could talk about that is so true almost always when it comes to these like big New York
About
Times
almost
selling.
everything.
Yeah, but these New York Times best-selling authors, but with so many things. I mean, I know back when I was managing social media for a university and they were always like wanting me to make them viral, a lot of the example videos were videos that were 3 to 5 years old.
Right.
Yes, they had just gotten viral, right? But they were created so long ago. So I think, part of the problem is we all logically in our brains know that what we see is a public perception and is just the tip of the iceberg. And we know in our heads that there's so much below the surface that we're not aware of. And yet we hold ourselves to the standard that is the tip of the iceberg. So how do we break free of that? Because Gwen, honestly, you're one of the very few people I see day to day in business who doesn't seem to fall into the comparison trap so often. So how do we avoid it? Give me your secrets. I'm writing them down.
Okay. So the first thing is to realize, I don't have that one in front of me, but if I did, I'd hold it up and say context matters. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Thank you.
Look,
Perfect.
I have it.
Context matters. And context has so many details
Mm-hmm.
in it, right? So many details that you can't possibly know unless you are intimately friends, relationship involved with whoever this other person is,
Mm-hmm.
right? You and I could probably do some comparisons because we are pretty good friends. We know each other. We understand where each other lives, what our, we probably could do some comparison, but we also don't do any comparison because we actually understand what all of those
Right.
details are, right? It doesn't even really occur probably
Mm-hmm.
to you to compare yourself to me because you understand how very different our lives are and our time in business
Mm-hmm.
and, all of the things. So it becomes easy not to compare because it's like, well, there's not really a comparison.
Right.
It's like comparing apples and, I don't know, bacon. Like, they're
Apples
both
and bacon
food.
for sure.
Right, bacon's always better than apples, but but still, they're both food, but beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
it gets really hard to, start drawing a lot of comparison, right? And because I talk about it so much with my clients, I stay very, very aware
Mm-hmm.
that no matter how much somebody else's business looks like my business, feels like my business. They're saying same things like my business. And I do. I mean, I still get caught saying, okay, so people are going to them, but they're not going to me, but I think they'd be happier with me than they are with them. Why is that? But it's more from a point of curiosity
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to because they're doing that, I'm failing,
Right.
right? Because I'm not failing. I
Mm-hmm.
may not be succeeding at the level I want to succeed, but it's not if I did absolutely everything they did that I would be successful
Mm-hmm.
because part of it is I've got to be me.
Yeah.
Me being me is part of where the success is always going to lie. And when we start doing the comparison, then all of a sudden I'm going to try and be Susie Q. Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
always going to fail at being Susie Q because I'm
Right.
not,
Yeah.
right? Always,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so realizing that I have a better chance at being successful at being Gwen
Yeah.
and not trying to be Tonya,
Mm-hmm.
right? Really allows me to stay focused on what can I learn from
Mm-hmm.
Tonya that may apply to me, but not say if I emulate Tonya, I will be as successful as Tonya.
Yeah. Um, I have like I want to gloss over this because it feels so known. Like, well, duh, that makes perfect sense. And yet I also know for a fact that everything you say is true. And I see people all the time beat themselves up over this time and time again. I was just having a conversation with somebody who had a client who wanted to completely switch gears on their marketing plan because they saw Glennon Doyle do something different. And, my friend is like, yes, you're right. Glennon Doyle is doing that, and it's like this and it's like that, and you're 100% true. But Glennon Doyle already has offer market fit, and you don't. And Glennon Doyle has been doing this for this many years, and you just started your business a year ago. And, and it's like all these differences that make what Glennon Doyle, and I don't even know what Glennon Doyle is doing right now, but makes what she is doing right now make sense for her. But also does not make it make sense for somebody who is fresh out of business or fresh into business. And something that I have seen you do time and time again, and we just wrapped up our quarterly tune-up, so this is fresh in my mind, is you do this for yourself, but you also encourage others to do this, is celebrating your own milestones, comparing you against you.
Because that's the only one that matters.
So how do you, if that's true, if that's all that matters is my performance against my performance, how can I stay focused on that or on my strengths and kind of my vision for the future when I'm surrounded by so much stuff that tells me that there's a different right way or that I should be aspiring to some other measurement of success?
Stop paying attention to all that other stuff.
Okay.
I mean,
Then.
So it really is, don't spend as much time scrolling on social media.
Ooh.
I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that you shouldn't spend some time on social media, because I think that keeps us aware of what's going on. But scrolling, and not necessarily even doom scrolling, just scrolling on social media and seeing, oh, they're doing this and they're doing this and that. Most of us do not need more ideas. That is not the thing that the entrepreneurial brain needs. We do not need more ideas. What we need actually is fewer ideas actually executed, so that we have data, our data, not someone else's data, our data that says, hey, this is actually working for me and my target audience and my product or my service offering and my stage of business and all of the things that is about me, or not. And if not, then I can choose to do something else. But trying to understand what everybody is doing is always going to be a losing proposition, because way too much stuff there, right? But being focused on what can I do and what is the data I can gather on that. One of the things our friend Nick Peterson says is, your data is more valid than my information any day of the week.
Say more. Because I've heard Nick say that, so I know what you mean, but our listener hasn't.
So when, Tonya leads my marketing, and when Tonya says, we need to put your email out, your newsletter out every week, and my instinct has been, I've tried that, it doesn't move the needle at all. And she's like, no, it's going to make a difference. And it's like, fine, we will do it, and we will collect the data. And then I will show you my data. And then you will realize that we only need to put our newsletter out once a month, which is what we're doing now, because this is the exact conversation Tonya and I had. She's like, no, we need to be really consistent about the newsletter with really good information, with all of the things. And we did it. I said, how long do we need to do it for you to have real data? Well, at least 6 months. Okay, so we'll do it for 6 months. I think we did it for a year.
We did it for a year.
It really did not move the needle at all. We did not get really any additional subscribers to speak of. I mean, there were some, there were ups and downs.
Plus or minus 10.
But nothing that actually would have been what would be an appropriate marketing result for the effort that was that was going in. We didn't get any more responses to offers. We didn't get any, there was nothing that happened. And although Tonya's data said it would, my data, because I had done it before, but not with Tonya, said, no, it won't. And my data was more valid than her data. Because she was looking at data from lots and lots and lots and lots of clients. Because some of her clients, it does make a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. It makes a huge difference.
Well, and full disclosure, right? In every single one of my clients, it makes a difference. This is the only business it hasn't made a difference. And what's funny is because we're doing some different things with marketing, and I shared that data with a couple of other people, and both of them were like, whoa, wait a minute. No, we got to go back. Right? And I was like, no, I dare you to find a hole in my data collection process. I dare you to find a place where I did the math wrong. This is what we have. And both of them were like, well, that's just curious. I'm like, it's totally curious. I'm just saying, we have buttoned that up. We're not going down that path again. The data is solid. We know what we know. We've got to figure out something else. So, but that is an excellent point. So number one, right, is in order to measure yourself against yourself, you've got to be tracking.
You have to be tracking. You have to be tracking in some way. So like in this case, you were really like tracking it in very analytical ways.
Yes.
But for a lot of our clients, when we're doing this, we're not having tracking in any sort of super analytical way.
Yeah.
They're actually, most of them are using their weekly course of action. They're going back and looking and saying, oh, yeah, at the beginning of the quarter, I was planning on doing this. And at the middle of the quarter, I got to here. And at the end of the quarter, I'm here. And oh my gosh, look how, look how awesome that is.
Right.
It's not some big, analytical spreadsheet keeping lots of numbers, doing lots of comparisons. But in some cases, it is. I have a very detailed spreadsheet that I keep track of that shows what my average length of engagement is with my clients over time. And then I also track it by quarter so that I can see what the trend is. If it goes up, if it goes down, what's going, because I know that data is actually useful in a lot of places. Just because it's true for me doesn't mean it would be true for you, given, a very, very similar business model, because there's all sorts of details that go into the context matters. But that's why when we get too wound up of saying, this is the thing, it's it, we don't just need to like learn new things. We need to actually try them out, collect the data, make decisions.
Right.
Move on.
And what I was going to say is just, it's important to be tracking the data, because I think a lot of times we get so caught up in everybody else is doing so much better than me that we hide from our data. We intentionally don't collect it because we don't want evidence of how bad we are, how far we have to go. But collecting that data is the only way to figure out if, regardless of where you sit compared to everybody else, where you sit compared to where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, back to, around tax season is often the first time a lot of business owners truly know if they did better last year than the year before.
Which always panics me, because you should be looking at those numbers.
Exactly. You should. So let's go to that, right? So let's talk about how to align your business goals with what you're doing, right? Like, again, get out of that comparison trap. Stop comparing your success to other people's success and really start comparing your success to your goals. And how often, like, what metrics should you be tracking? Because I know, because I work with you, that there are metrics that are beyond just revenue that are meaningful to track in any given business.
The challenge is, I think I've said it before, that sometimes SMART goals are done. And, SMART being the acronym SMART, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. I think I got the whole acronym correct, because we look for things that can easily fit into that criteria, even though it may not actually be motivational, right? And so revenue is one of those things that totally fits into that criteria. It's very specific. It's very measurable. We can, take action on it. We can set realistic goals, and we can say time bound by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter, by the end of, whatever. It's very totally fits that, all of those criteria. But the problem is most of us are less motivated by money than it sounds like, because we think we're motivated by money. But most of us are motivated by what we believe the money is going to provide us, which is often time freedom, flexibility, additional perks in our world. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's sending the kids to college. So yeah, like I want to send the kids to college needs money, but that's not what the money isn't what's motivating you. It's sending the kids to college. It's what's motivating.
Right.
Right. And so getting specific about what really, because then the next thing that happens is we say, oh, so we need to have a 7-figure business. Like, no, you need to take out of your business X amount of dollars, which may or may not require a 7-figure business. It may require an 8-figure business. It may require a 6-figure business. There's all sorts of factors that play in there. But that figuring out that piece of how much I take out of my business, that's a way harder equation. Way more difficult. And because it's so much more difficult, we just say 7-figure business because that's a way easier to track, right? But really the thing that's motivating us is that I need to be able to take $200,000 a year out of my business. That's really what's motivating you, because that's what I need to be able to pay the bills, to send the kids to school, to do, all the things. And now I could totally make up that number. Who knows what the number is? But that's a very different motivation. And so one of the things that we talk about is what is truly motivating? What does success truly mean to you? And you have to know, even someone who's running a business that looks exactly like yours, what success means to you could be completely different. We have a couple folks that we work with that fundamentally have identical businesses from the outside. And their motivations and their goals are 100% different from one another because of stage of life, family situation, the list goes on and on and on and on. Now, they know each other well enough. They don't even begin to think of themselves as competitors. They share information all the time. They do all of this. But in the outside world, those people would say, oh, these two people are direct competitors in most ways. And in most ways they are. But they don't see themselves that way. They aren't doing the comparison thing. They're happy to share information because they understand that they're at different spaces and places in their business. And there's a whole lot of context around their choices that they're making and what's motivating them and their business.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, especially because, what you're talking about, because that's the other thing we don't see, right? We see people's results when we're scrolling social media, but we don't see what drives them to achieve those results.
Right.
And we also...
Someone who's single, no spouse, all the rest of it, may have a ton more time to put into their business than someone who looks the same, right? Same age, same background, same experience, but also has a spouse and 4 kids.
Right.
And 2 pets. And an aging parent that's got Alzheimer's. That's a completely different set of context, although the business may look exactly the same. And if you're the person with all of those other things, it's like, why can't I do what, Jennifer does? Well, you can't do what Jennifer does is because Jennifer doesn't have a spouse and isn't dealing with aging parents and doesn't have 4 kids and 2 pets.
Right.
That takes some amount of your time and energy and mental space. No matter what else you put around it, it's going to take some amount of time, energy, and mental space.
Yeah. So we've talked about how you've got to align your business goals with what's going on in your life, right? Your values, your general life circumstances. It's one of those things. It's not that you can't have it all, but you may not be able to have it all at the same time, in the same way as these people you look up to. We've talked about understanding which metrics are meaningful for you. And in many cases, it's more than just how many dollars come in the door. Do you have any advice when it comes to figuring out or visualizing your version of success? Like your advice to the listener today of what is it that they can do practically that helps them get in touch with what they actually want versus what the messages surrounding them for what they should want?
The first thing is to know that is way, way, way so extremely very much harder than it sounds.
Mm.
Because most people are like, oh, well, it's blah, 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 and it's like, I bet that's not really true.
Mm-hmm.
Because we default to our family values, our cultural values, our societal values, who we hang out with, our social media, all of that, which probably does play into your unique final answer,
Mm-hmm.
but it probably isn't your unique final answer.
Okay.
And so trying to peel all of that off before you say, what do I really want? What
Mm-hmm.
do I really want? What actually matters? And be prepared for what matters for me now. Not what do I want in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
What matters for me right now? Because I had this conversation kind of accidentally with a friend of mine a number of months ago, where I made up an example which got her crying because it was her life, which was
Mm.
she envisioned having, the successful business and the big house and all of the things so that she could provide all the things that she wanted to provide for her kids and her time freedom and all of those things. And what she did is she used all of her kids' life to build the thing, which
Mm-hmm.
meant she wasn't at the kids' baseball game. She wasn't, she was working late and wasn't home for dinner. And when she was home, she was still opening up her laptop and not paying any attention to them and
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And she has no relationship with her children. And her
Mm-hmm.
children are still angry at her for this, even though these children are not little kids. These are
Right.
big kids. And what she did is she sacrificed the thing that she really wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be there for her kids during the time that was the only time that she could be there for her kids.
Yeah.
Right. So what's actually important right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because something like, I'm going to build, a multi-million-dollar business maybe just doesn't need to happen during this next 10 years while your
Mm-hmm.
kids are, in grade school going up through high school. Maybe that just doesn't need to happen now. Doesn't mean it can't happen as soon as you send their happy little bodies out of the house.
Right.
Right? Because we get caught in, we've got to do it now. If we don't do it now, it's not ever going to happen. We got to do it now. We got to do it now. No, there's a lot of life ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely. I mean, something could go terribly astray, but most of us aren't living our life assuming that tomorrow we're going to die.
Right.
Right? But we treat our goals like tomorrow we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, let's actually think about what's important for where we are right now with all of the things that are going on. And one of the questions that I always ask in the 531 is to say, what do you know most likely will be true in X number of years?
Mm-hmm.
And things that I'm talking about is, how old will your spouse be? How old will your kids be? Where will you be? Where will you likely be living? How old will your parents, will they be needing you more? I mean, like, because part of it is to get into the space of like, what's probably going to be true?
Mm-hmm.
And let's plan around reality instead of some make-believe perfection that none of us ever have.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to what you just said a moment ago, right? That's the hard part, is what we want. What we want is a downloadable worksheet with a couple of journal prompts and that we can fill out in 5 to 10 minutes. And at the end of 10 minutes, we've cracked the code. Going back to the intro to this episode, right? We've cracked the code. And it's not that simple because life simply is not that simple. And, as you always say, right, it's like people can be problematic. It's the nature of being a people. We are all humans. And back to different motivations, different circumstances, different. There's way more that's different about us compared to somebody else than there is the same. Not that there isn't unity there with our similarities. It's just different, which is why, the comparison I'll call it a trap. I've been trying to avoid calling it a trap because I feel like that's so overplayed. But the comparison trap, it's why it steals energy. It's why it steals creativity and it steals confidence. All of those things that you actually need to build a successful business are stolen from you when you spend so much time looking at what everybody else is doing and letting that make you feel like you're less than. And so, Gwen, you mentioned the 531. I feel like it's important as we close to say, the 531 is a service that all of our clients actually get. And so if you go to everydayeffectiveness.com and click on the services tab, you can explore all of those services, and the 531 would be included. And we'll go back to the episode that we did where we put me in the hot seat with it. It is a great way to get in touch with the things you want that you didn't know you wanted. Not going to lie there. But ultimately, as we close, I just want to say that, when you stop measuring yourself against others and start defining success on your own terms, as Gwen mentioned, yes, you feel better, but that's not what this is about, right? You actually perform better as well. And successful businesses, no matter what it looks like on social, they're not carbon copies of one another, right? They are some type of expression of the founder's unique vision, unique strengths, and unique values, even if they're not putting those on public display. So your path to success doesn't need to look like anybody else's in order to be valid or fulfilling, but you've got to be willing to break free.
I think it is your path to success more likely will happen when it doesn't look like anybody else's. I think you find greater success and more fulfillment when it doesn't look like somebody else's. Doesn't mean it's not similar, because there definitely can be places where it's similar. But when it actually doesn't try to look like anybody else's, when it really looks like Tonya's path, or it really looks like Gwen's path, and when people, walk it in any way, shape, or form, they say, "Oh yeah, that seems totally Gwen. That seems totally Tonya. That makes perfect sense." How all of those pieces come together. And, our previous series was Simplify to Amplify. Well, one of the easiest things to drop to simplify your life is comparison.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Just drop it.
Yeah.
Just drop it. Like I said, not that you don't pay attention to what other people are doing, because sometimes there's good ideas and there's things that are of interest and whatnot. But for the sake of curiosity and learning and insight, not for, well, if I do that, then I'm going to have their fill in the blank, because it rarely works that way.
Yeah. And I think this is the sort of thing, I mean, you said at the beginning, Gwen, it's not easy, right? It's one of those things that's simple, but not easy. And you benefit from outside help. And if you don't have that outside help, if you don't have that perspective, I definitely would encourage you to check out our services over at everydayeffectiveness.com. And if you're not ready to go into true accountability, where it's eyeball to eyeball and you're digging through this, then Insight to Impact is a way to dip your toe into the water. That's our weekly accountability subscription, which every Friday just gives you one question to reflect on. It's not a big journaling page. It's just one question. But when you respond with your reflection, you actually get a real live human response tailored to your specific situation. And that is a way to move the needle incrementally, week after week. And because it's just between you and Gwen, there's no need for comparison. You're not confronted with what everybody else is doing, how everybody else answered the question. It's just you versus you from week to week. And you'll find information on that at everydayeffectiveness.com/impact. In the meantime, until we see each other again, just keep in mind that defining success on your own terms is 100% valid, no matter what anybody else tells you. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.